Good evening. This is Tim Markle. I am part of the Education Committee for the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin, and we are here tonight with part of our ongoing safety series. As we said earlier, it's a series that never ends. We keep finding new topics that we want to talk about. So tonight, I'm really excited to have back some panelists that were with us the last time we talked safety, and I will let them introduce themselves, and hopefully I will not be talking for most of the next 45 minutes or so. But we are here tonight to talk about how you can plan out keeping your kiddo safe, making a safety plan, implementing a safety plan, possibly even starting with what is a safety plan. But first, if you guys wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves, who you are, and I'm just going to go straight across where you are on top of my screen right now. Just introduce yourself, your connection with autism, with safety, whatever you would like to say. Molly.
Me. My name is Molly Neff. My connection to autism is I'm an autism mom. And I think that's the most important thing about my background. But I do have a doctorate in autism home safety. I am a nurse by background, so my doctorate is in nursing practice. And my interest here is really in keeping kiddos safe and helping share the research that I have done in the topic area on safety.
Excellent. And seeing as how that Molly is now an official doctor, we're allowed to have her on more than once or twice. And so we'll bring her back and she can explain what her research was, because I don't understand it. So I need to have her explain it a little bit more. Welcome. Glad you're here. Amy.
I'm pretty sure you understand it because you've lived it.
Valid.
Hi, my name is Amy Lyle, and I am an information and referral specialist with the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. And I am also on the ECHO Autism team with Dr. Molly Neff. I'm very excited to work with in an ongoing way. And I also, I'm a social worker, and I used to be a case manager in the Children's Long-Term Support Waiver Program. And so have been thinking about safety for a long time, as it was always one of the number one things families talked about if you asked them. So I continue to learn all the best stuff from parents, and I know I'm going to learn more tonight.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amy. And David, care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. I'm David Peterson. Like Molly, I am an autistic parent as well. I have 3 sons, one of which is autistic, a little guy named Cole, who's 9, soon to be 10. In my day job, I work for Microsoft. I'm an Azure app dev specialist. So that makes basically a long way to say I'm a computer nerd. And so I come at a lot of the safety stuff from a technology standpoint. So online safety, GPS trackers, that sort of thing. So I'm really onto the tech side of things, just because I can't get enough of it because I do it in my day job. Why not do it in my personal time too? So, and yeah, that's kind of my connection to this community. And I do Autism 101 presentations for the educational committee periodically. So thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, David. And then full disclosure, I do have a 23-year-old who is on the autism spectrum. So I do come at this from a couple of different hats myself. So let's talk safety. Last time we covered a lot of different aspects of safety and where we can look at safety in the lives of our kiddos. And we wanted to come back and talk a little bit more about being planful about this, and maybe even forming what some people call a safety plan. Would anybody care to enlighten me as to exactly what a safety plan is? My kid was not an eloper. He liked to stay glued to my side when we went outside. And so we didn't need to worry so much about where is he. But I talk to a lot of families that's one of their biggest worries, is where's my kid? So how do you think about a safety plan? What is a safety plan?
David, do you want to start and then I'll piggyback?
Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of autistic parents, they learn by doing. So you learn the first time your child elopes, you're like, oh, I think we need a safety plan. The other thing that I really like to think about a safety plan is it's a, if you're really on the ball, you've written it down. As parents, sometimes we don't always write things down. It's kind of it's a verbal contract between your spouse or guardian, like, hey, here's what we're going to do. I would say my wife and I have I wouldn't call it a formal contract, but we are planners and we like to write things down. So OneNote is kind of our savior. So we do have a lot of things written in OneNote. For us, it's typically been more stopping it before he'd ever elope, right? So he does have a GPS tracker on his wrist. I think COVID-19 has been really interesting and how that's impacted safety and the safety plan, because he's not always wearing his GPS. It's essentially a phone on his wrist for Verizon is what it is. It's called a Gizmo Pal. He doesn't wear it that often because he just doesn't want to go anywhere because he's at home. It's COVID. Even though we're doing virtual school, he doesn't threaten to leave anymore because I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we scared him over COVID. So going outside means you might get COVID. So we'll have to deal with that later. But yeah, I think we try to be a little proactive in from a safety perspective of, rather than a reactive approach to a safety plan. Like let's keep him in the house. If he was to get outside of the house, we have a GPS tracker. Make sure that's on him if there's ever an issue, right? And again, I'm the IT nerd, so I always talk about depth and defense, right? And so that's really what we bring to the party, is just how many different layers of the onion can we stack when it comes to a safety plan. I could talk about this all day, so I'll kind of lean over.
Yeah, and I love that idea about stacking and the different layers. So I want to make sure that we can come back to that. But I did want to give Molly a chance to talk a little bit about the initial thoughts of safety plan as well. But don't let me lose the whole, I love that idea of stacking protection.
No, I think that's amazing. No, I agree with David too. For us, elopement is the biggest concern. And it is for a lot of parents with kiddos on the autism spectrum. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues that we see. 26% of our kids run away long enough for us to be concerned or actually call for help. And 65% of the time when they run away, there's a traffic injury in relation to it. But the big concern for us is that 75% of drowning cases for kids, which is the #1 cause of death for children related to accident or injury, are because of an elopement episode. And anywhere between 50 and 80% of the kids on the autism spectrum do run away, depending on your source. And so it is the biggest concern, but then also there is that safety around water and identification of where our water locations are. For us, we have other safety concerns that we have to think about when our kiddo goes out in public. And that is that our kiddo is one of the kids that chooses to eat non-food items or has pica. And pica is a concern because some of the items that he can eat can poison him. Other items can expand in his belly and cause some issue. So when we talk about safety planning, we do have to write it down. Like David mentioned, some parents, it's more like the verbal communication amongst themselves. But I have to write it down. I have to share it with others, because when he goes to daycares, schools, other places, I need to make it very clear to them that there are certain items that he can't be around without direct visual supervision. We have had ER visits where we have eaten various items, Orbeez, those little gel-filled things. FYI, they'll pass. Phloem, it's a styrofoam. It's beautifully colorful. FYI, it doesn't expand in the stomach, it'll pass. Somebody's been in a lot of contact with poison control. Crayons, colored pencils, the fluff from the inside of couches, Play-Doh's an easy one, that one just goes. But we've eaten all those items. And so one of the concerns I have for folks is that, I want you to also make sure that you regularly check furniture for small tears or rips, because he will open it up and he will eat the upholstery from it with inside. And so those are items that I have discussions with and verbally, or, in writing state to schools and other places that might have upholstered furniture. So for us, we have to talk about a little bit more. When we recently moved to McFarland, where we are right now, and they have an amazing program called SNAP, which took a lot of the work away from me as far as writing things down. Because they gather that information in an at-home interview. They're very open with it. They have a nice letter that explains the program. It's from the National Autism Society. They use it here in McFarland for other diagnoses outside of autism, Alzheimer's, or anytime someone might elope, adults and children. And they gather as much information as you're willing to share. And because I'm a sharer, I'm willing to share with you what we also gather on him. So it's not PHI because it's my own kid, but I am comfortable sharing with you our SNAP. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay?
Sure.
I don't have any idea. Why don't you give it a shot and see if it works?
I think it will work the way these are set up usually.
It looks like you should be allowed to.
All right, I am going to. So when we were with in other communities, we would contact the local police departments and share with them that we had a son on the autism spectrum who liked to run away. And we would share as much information, but it was mostly physical description and then our contact information. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
This is my son's SNAP. So there's some private information on there, but I feel really confident because it's shared with the police department and other things. And if you ever see this boy and he's not with me, call this number. So the great information here is that it gives you specifically his name, but we update this annually. And they reach out to me and they point out that I haven't updated this in a while. They have permission for me to use his school picture. This year we didn't have one, so I provided them with one, but otherwise they automatically, every year that a new school picture is taken, they work with the liaison officer in the school district and they automatically update this. It gives a physical description of my son, his current address, and then our emergency contact information and who we are. Restrictions here, it's this will eat or drink harmful objects or materials. So it's really important that people understand that he's gonna eat other things, and I can probably word that a little bit better. His medical needs, should he have some issues while he's there, signs he's escalating when he starts to cover his ears, high-pitched squeals, say no, no, no. Light touch can cause anxiety. And this is electronic and then in physical print form with the police department so they can get it in all of their cars. What he likes, what he doesn't like, how to approach him. That's okay to cover his ears. And then at the bottom, they actually will upload specific pics that your child uses if they use picture exchange communication. So by far with working with our police departments, this is the best system that we've come up with. Prior to that, I was writing it all down and it wasn't as good. Now I share this screen because I update it with the police department. I share this screen with our schools, with daycares, with other places. And as things come up, I make note of it. But it's something that's really important for me. It's like David said, it's really communicating. In my opinion, and this is just personal, there is no research on this that I'm aware of. You can't over communicate about your child's symptoms or disease state that causes them to be unsafe. You can't. It might be embarrassing at first. People might not understand, but if you share it, people will help. Anyone that comes into our house needs to know those things that can make him unsafe.
Molly, I love the fact that can be useful in so many different situations. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sitting here in my head going, okay, if you would ever get involved in after school projects, if you would get involved in a karate class, if you would get involved in swimming school, is that this is the basic information that people need to know to help understand communicating with your child. Yep. And what the different signs and different behaviors might mean. So there's no excuse for them to go, well, I just didn't know. No, you knew. It's right here. He's saying, no, no, no. He's covering his eyes. He's obviously escalating. We need to calm it down.
Yeah.
Tim, just to show you. So like, just to show a juxtaposition, it's been a couple years because he's now in third grade, but I just want to show you an example of what we used to do. We haven't had to do this for a couple of years, but
yeah, that would be great, David.
Much like Molly's, we call it a passport. This was more for the school. It wasn't necessarily for the police department. We have talked to the school resource officer. She's taken her own picture. They have their own data. It's by and large what I feel like, and again, I don't have any data to back this up, but I feel like every police department does it a little bit differently. I feel like Cottage Grove has a specific template that they like to do. But for the sake of this series, right, I did want to show this, and I had actually forgotten about it, to be honest with you. But this was more for the school, and the way my wife put this together was put the most important info at the top because it's next to the picture, and then as it goes from top to bottom, it's less important, right? So if you read nothing on here, just read what he loves and how he responds best. You know, I respond well to first then, choices between 2 to 3 things, simple direct language, and short transitions, right? If you manage to make it to the bottom, it'll tell you what he doesn't like, right? So it's all about just trying to give you the most, like, these little nuggets of information when you encounter Cole. Obviously, he's much bigger now. He's not 7 anymore. He's now 10, so he's a lot bigger. But you know, these I like that Molly brought it up, and I totally spaced on that. We actually put this together. But these, like, when it comes to a security plan, right? There's actually multiple security plans, right? There's one for in the house, you and the spouse. There's one for you and the police, and then there's one for you and the school, and then wherever else he might go. So, like, I think it's a really important distinction to make, that when you have an autistic child, you're going to have multiple security plans, right? You're going to have it depending on the audience, right? Or who's watching that your child, or, you know, and so, you know, I can tell Molly and I would get along great because we're both planners and we like to write things down. So, you know, when it comes to my parents, they don't really like, and I think it's an important distinction to make here. Like, there will be people that you encounter as a parent that have no interest in reading this, or are less than impressed or less than interested in reading it. And so you just have to think of a different way to share this information with them. And so, you know, we used to laminate this. We used to print it out and laminate it and give it to all the teachers and all the aides and stuff, and they found it super helpful. When he went to daycare, they were less than interested in this stuff, so we communicated to him. But it's you know, like Molly, I wholeheartedly like endorse these kinds of things because they can be super helpful for people.
I noticed like daycares often have like behavior plans that are templated versions that they like to have. And so for me, it's like a copy and paste of what's on our plans. David, do you do a handoff? Like, make sure that you have somebody is aware that they are in charge of that child at that moment in time?
Yeah, I would say, but that it's always interesting, that term. So when we've gone to places like Disney, or we've taken cruises, Cole loves cruising, well, pre-COVID. I mean, like we used to use that verbiage, right? Handoffs. When we've been to my parents, sometimes we'll use that term. I think the schools and the daycares used to use a slightly different term, but it's essentially the same idea. It's when we've noticed through COVID, when we start playing outside, and as he gets older, we don't necessarily have to use that term as often, or have to do the handoff, because we're starting to trust him a bit more. But then the pessimist in me kicks in, and we're like, no, we need to go back to the way we've always done it, because it only takes one instance. We live in Wisconsin. There are sub-zero temperatures, and kids do tend to play outside when it's sub-zero. You know, I'm getting to the age now with Cole that, like, at what point do you give your child agency and trust? Because at some point, I mean, he's not 7 anymore. He's now 10. Someday he'll be 16. Someday he'll be in his mid-20s. You have to give him, you know, some agency at some point. And that's always been the struggle for me, is like, he still looks like a baby to me, right? And will always be my baby. So it's like, I think that's the struggle as he gets older and starts to hit puberty, is there's going to be times where he wants that kind of freedom. And how do you structure it? Because he's not a neurotypical child, so that we're navigating.
Can I add?
Yep, just one second, Nancy, because you came on after we started. I do want to acknowledge that we have a couple people that have joined us in the conversation. And so please do feel free to raise your hand or unmute, as we are very open to questions and to discussions. So yes, Nancy, please go ahead.
Well, I just was very impressed, Molly, with your stuff, and David, that you do something very similar. I have something to share. My son, who is gloriously autistic, is 42. So he's way past this. And I'd like to share my screen also, just a second. This is my son's profile. And he, It's written in the first person because he's an adult, he's 42. It has very similar information, especially to what David has. It talks about his communication issues because that is his major problem. He can't communicate with people very well. And down here are things I like the most, things that bug me. And it's a single page document that we can hand out. I have been doing this since he was in kindergarten.
So where do you hand it out now? You know, over the years, what are the different places that you've used this, Nancy?
This version was developed specifically for the Iris transition when he was going into adult services, and the adult services was changing. It was a document we gave to his Iris consultant. And then we also would use this in any kind of situation where he is unknown to a group of people. And just like what David said, just like what Molly said, having this available, one thing that I discovered that you really haven't mentioned is when you have this stuff written down, you look more like a professional parent. People respect you more because you have taken the time to do this and you're on top of things. That was one thing I discovered why I kept doing this. Also, when my son was younger and there was more changes, I actually kept a document like this with his likes and his dislikes and everything. And I also kept a document of a separate document, which I called facts. And it was things like when he learned to talk, when he got injured, who were his contacts in which grades, where was he at school, where did he have jobs, who was his supervisor, what was their phone number, all this kind of facts. And I updated that document on a yearly basis so that I would remember things when someone would, like inquiries for Social Security benefits and other kinds of things, research projects that we were enrolled in, asked these questions. So, and also just if a doctor wanted to know, well, when did he break his leg, which my son never did, but it was there. When did his allergies first develop? You know, this type of thing. So I would recommend that people who are doing this, not just for safety purposes, but for record keeping purposes, do a facts document as well as a document to hand out to people to tell them the basics. Because you're absolutely right, David. Some people will not read this, but people will definitely read. They say that no matter how pale the ink, it's better than somebody's mind or memory. And that's absolutely true. So having it written down, wonderful. And having a separate thing, especially Molly, your son has got so many more needs than my son does. And also, David, you asked about when do you step back? When can you trust them by themselves? The rule that I seem to come up with my son, at least anyway, is when he could tell time and react to that knowledge and monitor the passage of time and react to that knowledge. That was when he was able to not have somebody with him all the time. We started out with 10-minute time increments in a mall saying, okay, you can be in the mall and you can be in the toy store for 10 minutes, but you've got to be back outside in the mall 10 minutes from now. And then we would watch to see if he would do it. And then we expanded the places and the time links slowly. So it wasn't all that he was dependent one day and independent the next. It's everything with these guys is tiny baby steps and monitoring. And, someday I think, Molly, your son will not eat the couch. That will be true. But in the meantime, you have to monitor it. So thanks for listening to this. This has been done this for a long time.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
That is great advice, though, about the fact sheet, because you're absolutely right. I mean, think about the number of times that you have to recount in detail your entire life story from the beginning of birth. I mean, I just remember, like, was there anything traumatic about your birth? How long was your birth? You're right. You're absolutely right. We have to write so many things down, or, how can we remember it all? That's great advice.
And update it every year. Save
Yeah.
1 year's version, make another version the next year.
Yeah, you probably could do it every day.
Yeah.
One thing
Otherwise,
I
you'd have a
noticed on
document.
my safety plan is that I haven't updated. We most recently identified that Kai does not feel cold or hot and will put his hand directly into cooking food while cooking and has burned himself. And so I think that's important information that I need to update my safety content on, because people need to know that he's not going to feel cold or hot or express cold and hot. I think he still feels it, but so that's important things, because I know that historically the daycares had a hard time with, he won't put his coat on, but we assume he'll feel cold eventually. I don't know that we can trust that.
Cannot.
Right?
No.
You can. And what I love about all of this is what you guys are all talking about one of these key components of, to be successful, you have to know your kid. And it takes studying your kid and understanding their behavior and their likes and their dislikes, and then figuring out how to communicate that to other people that don't have the time or maybe the inclination to get to know your kid.
Mhm.
But there is that neurodiversity, and we want people to understand who our kid is. And so I think that whole studying your child and figuring out those changes, those nuances is so important. And I also think it's important in safety, because as Nancy said, is her son doesn't react the way that David's son does, doesn't react the way Molly's son does, doesn't react the way my son does, is they're going to react to the situations differently. And so when David talks about, building those layers, it's going to be dependent upon who that child is and what that child needs. So can you guys talk a little bit more about, sort of layering the safety around your kid? I'm, like David said, it's different when you're inside versus outside. I'm sure it's different at Disney World than it is in the local park. So what are the sort of the different levels of safety that we can start to plan for with our kiddos?
I'd love to make David start first again.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about, so we call it depth and defense, right? So the idea is who has eyes on him, right? If you can't have eyes on him, then is there a way to track him, right? So there's his iPad, if you didn't know better, it's like surgically implanted on his hands. Never. So, Find My iPhone or Find My iPad is on, right? So it literally, I mean, I'll deal with that someday, sometime later, but screens and all. But then there's the GPS tracker, right? So if he's not at home, we typically put it on him, right? Is it charged, right? On top of it too, we because of his behavior, we have to let him know what his schedule is going to be like, right? So that there's a dual benefit to that. One, it helps with his anxiety. Two, it lets us know where he's supposed to be, right? And if he's not where he's supposed to be, then we know where to go check, right? We also have a security system in the house, right? So that's meant for the door chime more than anything. It wasn't meant to keep bad guys out. It was meant to keep Cole in. So it's always interesting to tell that story to people, like, oh, you have a security system. Yeah, to keep my autistic child in the house. So again, it's, and I haven't really drawn it out, but like if you start to think about it, it's about like concentric circles around Cole, right? And as you get farther and farther out, what are some of those things that you can use to kind of protect him? When it's winter, sadly, we do have to put his shoes and boots up, right? Because he has threatened to elope. And when it's winter, we think he has some interoception things going on. So we feel that, much like Molly's child, maybe he doesn't feel hot or cold like we might feel hot and cold. So he doesn't get, he goes outside and it could be 30 below and he could do it without a coat and sandals on. Yes, I know it's Wisconsin and it's cool to wear sandals in the middle of the winter, but like usually it's cold, right? I'm like, Cole, are you cold? Not really. I'm okay, right? So it's like we're working through that. But again, when he was much younger, we absolutely had to hide his boots and shoes because he would threaten to leave and actually open the door and go outside, right? So he tried to break through those, those lines of defense and try to get out. So, there's lots of things. And again, we've written some of it down. I think COVID, you kind of spurred some thought in my head, Tim, around like there's pre-COVID world and then there's post-COVID world, and kind of how has that impacted his behavior? Because now we're 12 plus months in, right? And he's very concerned about COVID. Monona Grove is going back to 4 days of school a week. And COVID was definitely a concern of his, right? He wasn't super interested in going back. We made the decision to keep him virtual just for the sake of consistency of schedule. But COVID was a long, I mean, he's old enough now to know the difference. So like, this conversation has really spurred some thought in my head that the security conversations we had pre-COVID are not the same anymore, because he is very concerned about the virus and how, granted, it helps from a security standpoint, but it doesn't help him when when the world does eventually reopen. There are new things to have to address, as a parent.
Well, and you start to layer what's most important. And that's where you get into the mask wearing, the distance, the going inside, outside groups of people. What matters to my kid? What's the most important thing at this point for him to keep him safe? Because that's going to change.
Well, that was true pre-COVID, and that's certainly true now, right? As an autistic parent, you always pick your battles, right? Because you can't wave a magic wand and fix your child, right? Like there's always things to be worked on. That's true even for my neurotypical children. There's always things to be working on. It's just, there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many things I can focus on, right? And so, like you said, Tim, you pick your battles. That's the nature of being a parent.
Absolutely. So Molly, do you have any sort of different layers of defense or ways that closer or farther reaches of protection?
Yeah, but before I do, I do want to just comment on one of David's comments just a moment ago about challenges with your neurotypical child. To yell at my children, I have only paused my video or my audio once, and it was the neurotypical one that I yelled at. Yeah. He was literally feeding the cat to a dog. So
and I just want to make sure that is where you're encouraging that behavior, or is that behavior discouraged at your house?
That was
Discouraged.
a discourage of feeding cats to giant beastie dogs.
Okay, just making sure.
No, I totally agree with it. There are different safety plans, different people you communicate with, different levels that you have to deal with. And I, just like David, have a burglary system to watch where my child is in my home. I have alarms that are meant to tell me when someone's breaking in, that tells me when my son is leaving his bedroom, exiting home. And now I just installed a video motion detection, and I put it under his bed so that I can identify when he's getting out of the bed. Because it wasn't enough for me to know that he was in and out of the room, because he was starting to go around his room and kind of disrupt that. So now I need to know when he's out of the bed. So, we amp up the levels of the technology that we use. This one, I think just like David's, can audio alarm and alarm to my watch or my phone or other devices so that I can hear or see it when it's going on. So we have that in the house communication, who has eyes on him, who's watching him at the moment. My husband's supposed to be, so gosh, I hope he is, because we did a handoff. But then there's the neighborhood, right? Because if something fails, if I'm not close enough to identify that front door is open, I'm about to yell at my other one too. I need to know that the neighbors know the situation that's going on in our home. And so I over communicate with my neighbors about my son is autistic. He may run. If you see him out and there is no parent, I need you to let me know. Here is my phone number. So much so that I feel terrible about it to this day, but I was letting my son play in the backyard while I cooked dinner. And our old house, it had like a window that I could watch, but I had to go back and forth. And I missed the moment when my neighbor busted into my house to scream that Kai is in the backyard. I know. But that's the best case scenario, right? I built that village. I built that expanding village of safety, because people know that if they see Kai outside and Molly is not there, run screaming into her house and alert her. And you build that foundation of trust so that when you go to locations like Disney or water parks or places that will never, ever apparently go again, that you have that ability to hand off with any person in your circle of trust, and they know how to manage and deal with that. And I think the best thing is that I built apparently like this big bulldog bear mom in my mother, who, when we were prepping for our our backyard wedding, somebody else offered to watch Kai for me and having a conversation with me. And out of nowhere, my mom is like, absolutely not. You have no idea how to take care of him. You don't know his safety plan. You will not be watching him. And I'm like, hey, mom, it was 5 minutes. I just wanted to pee. But like, B, I can do that handoff. But no, she stepped in and took care of it for me. So that was great. But you do have to have and very different ideas of what safety means, because the daycare, the school, they all have different rules. They all have different safety measures. And so they need to be aware of those risk behaviors in your child. But they need to be involved in it too. They need to be equal partners, and to just tell them how to manage is maybe not within their resources or their skills and abilities. One of the things we've had to do is purchase Children's Long-Term Support Waiver assisted us with purchasing additional door alarms for daycares, additional gates for daycares, additional safety measures for daycares, because they were specific to my child and not necessarily for the daycare entirely. We did do special picture cards for the bus drivers when he got lost on the bus. So bus drivers know my child and they verbally address him every day to make sure that they've checked out the box that he is there. And if not, they reach out. So there are those, you expand your village, you communicate, like I mentioned before, you can't over communicate that your child has this ability that causes them to have an increased risk, or you're putting them at risk.
So Molly, I'm now going to do the thing that you should never do, and I'm going to ask a question that I did not prepare you guys to answer.
Son of a gun.
I know, right? But as you guys are talking, it strikes me that this is yet another area where parents of children with special healthcare needs have to figure a whole new system out. I mean, parents with, a bunch of neurotypical children, they may have that burglar alarm, but it's to keep people out. But you have to worry about keeping your children in and keeping them safe and knowing where they are at the whole time. So how did you learn this? Where did you go to find this technology? Where do you go to get the help? How do you figure out if the waiver is going to pay for this or that? I mean, how do parents do this?
Honestly, Tim, do you want to know honestly what I did?
Yes.
I got a doctorate in it. What are the
Okay,
rest
well
of
then
us
we'll
do?
just have everybody call you because you spent the time. So we'll just call the doctor.
No, this is exactly what happened though. I met other parents and I heard their struggles and I heard their challenges. And, I'm a nurse by background. I was a registered nurse still a registered nurse. Okay. I guess that never goes away. But I was a registered nurse for a really long time. And so my background is assessing and reacting to the different things that I see in a patient. And so when I met with families and I listened to their struggles, they were struggles I had, but what I was doing was scientifically reviewing literature so that I could apply it to my son. And what I identified was that there was that lack of one stop for people to find this information of one location. And so, yeah, I got my doctorate in it so that I could know how to take care of my kid. But also so I could share that wealth so that other people didn't have to go and do that research. But I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It kind of sucks.
Oh, okay.
Friends
So
don't-
then
friends go to grad school. No.
I hear you, David.
No.
So so is this where I bring you back in 2 months and we talk about how parents can access what you have learned so that you can download everything that you have learned into their lives as well? Can we come back and talk about that?
Like I'll tell you this. So I didn't get a doctorate. Thoughts and prayers, Molly. But
You managed this long.
I'll tell you from my perspective. It's interesting because like you just have to ask questions, right? Like unfortunately, kids don't come with manuals. Autistic kids sure don't come with manuals. Navigating these waters, there's you can Google all day long and you're going to find all kinds of opinions and answers. half of which are kind of right, half are kind of wrong. Like it, unfortunately, there are places you can go, right? The Wiseman Center is one of them. There's all kinds of, the Autism Society is one of them. Like there are lots of places to go, but like, when we got our diagnosis, it was like, all right, is there like do I get like a manual, or is there like one stop shop you can go for information? And unfortunately there isn't.
No,
That's the struggle. Now, granted, there are, I mean, in Dane County, there are some phenomenal services that you're not going to find anywhere else, right? I have
they are
friends
great.
who live in other states and in other countries, and it's a completely different ballgame. So we are incredibly like lucky to have the resources that we have here, in the Madison area. But it's one of those things that like I think about, either different, socioeconomic, like if you're in a different place socioeconomically, or if you live in a different place, right? From speaking from generalities, like it can be really tough to navigate these waters, right?
Yeah.
And in some places, yeah, the only place you're going to learn is by getting a PhD in this, right? Unfortunately, but yeah, it's even for I would say I'm not on the same level with Molly, but my wife and I are doing just okay. But
Doing
it's like
fantastic.
well, thank you. But you think about other people who are not doing fantastic, right? And you really start to feel for those kinds of folks, and it's like one of those things that like that's why I like to give back. That's why I like to do one-on-one presentations. That's my contribution back to it. Like I constantly have this conversation with my wife, and like if you're in a different position in life, and you either can't do the research, or don't know how to do the research, or you don't know who to ask, like you're treading water at best or drowning at worst, right? And it's always made me, this is kind of you're hitting at the kind of the thesis of like why I get involved with these kinds of things, is it's like trying to get back to the community, because there are lots of people who unfortunately, and Molly, feel free to disagree with me, but I'd say for a lot of parents, we're the exception rather than the norm.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, right? And so like how to do that. And again, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but
No,
it's just one of those
you are
things that,
spot on, David. You're absolutely spot on. And that was what killed me, was having those conversations and identifying that not everybody can scientifically review literature like I can in the time frame that I can. And so that's why I did it. It wasn't for me. I mean, I'd already done it for me. You'd already done it for you. But what I really wanted to get to the heart of is, why do these kids get injured so much more frequently? What causes it? And what has science shown us can actually reduce that risk? And so I did a 10-year systematic review of all the scientific literature on the content area after doing a review of national and local data on the emergency rooms and what brought kids on the autism spectrum to ERs and urgent cares. What injuries were they getting, and what behaviors were causing that? And then tested it at the Wiseman Center, like you mentioned. I sent it to the Wiseman Center and Dane County social workers, and we tested it on actual kids to see if we could make it safer. And I'm sure we're far from perfect. We're going to do it again and again and again and make it better and better and better. But what the goal of this is, it looks like 6 days from now, this should be publicly facing and available to folks if they Google it. But the other really important thing is it has contact information for us that were involved in it. And so I hope what it does is take that information that you and I were able to find and piece together and learn and figure out. I hope it puts it in the hands of those people that can't, because you're right. Oh, that's what killed me, was talking to these families and just hearing their stories. And, I just truly felt that science had a way to help us out. And, so far, knock on wood, I've been able to find that that's the case.
That is awesome. And I do want to give Amy a chance. Do you?
No,
because I know,
she doesn't.
I know Amy talks to families every day.
Yes, she does. She's my crutch.
There you go. And so, I mean, what else can families do?
You know what two things. One is that I just was reflecting back on being a newer case manager and really not knowing a lot, period. I mean it when I say families have taught me, and I've learned everything. from families, and I bring my social work practice into it, and there's me that I bring into it, but I have learned from you all. And so I am so excited about your tool, Molly, and I'm so excited for opportunities like this for you to share your experiences, David and Molly and Nancy, because we all learn from them. And I feel like children's waiver case managers, schools, mental health folks who are interfacing with families who have autistic kids could really use this information, because I feel like a lot of times families were coming to me, or I was hearing about safety concerns and I didn't necessarily know what to do. We were in it together and we would research together, but I'm so excited to have this evidence-based information. And I think other people will be too, because it just is, it's empowering, right? It feels like you're guessing less. And of course, as you all know, it's trial and error, right? With what works and what doesn't. And so there's always that fun period of, oh, yeah, that wasn't it. But then you hit that place of, oh my gosh, this is working. Or those routines. I'm hearing you all just in routines together, revisiting things with school and revisiting things with each other, with your partners, and revisiting these pieces. And that's something I'm taking away too. It isn't like safe. You never stop thinking about safety. and we as providers need to keep asking about it. How's that going? How are you doing? What's your stress level, you know, about safety right now? Because it sounds like it's in a different place, but things keep changing, right? So somebody's not ingesting the couch anymore. You know, maybe it's something different. I'm not saying ingesting. I'm just saying it will shift and change, right? Just like parenting. There's always something. And I was just sort of listening for different ways that waiver funding might be used. And I would love to hear from you all about like what you did use waiver funding for. Because I was thinking, oh yeah, like you could use waiver funding to purchase a lamination, you know, machine. So if you're laminating stop signs to put by your doors, or if you're laminating your safety plan to hand out to people, like you can use waiver funding for that. And ink for your printer, a printer. You
So
can use
I'm
it
going to
to,
rudely interrupt Amy
oh,
because I'm just rude that way. And so if you are listening to this and you're wondering, what is this waiver funding
oh,
that Amy would be talking about? It's a children's long-term support waiver. And if you want to know about eligibility, and if you want to know how to contact somebody about learning more about the waiver, is you can call Amy or any of the information referral specialists at the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Health Care Needs.
Yep.
We'll try to get the URL in with the video up on the YouTube, or also you can call the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin, and they have people that want to help you connect to these resources as well. So just if you're listening and going, what is this waiver thing? There are places you could find out more about it. So now that I'm done interrupting you, continue.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for jumping in. And it is absolutely true that not everybody qualifies for this funding. So but we can talk about that, and we definitely want to make sure everybody's aware of it and knows, and if they have wanted to apply and see if their kid qualifies, that they've had the opportunity to do that. So that's such a great point.
Fantastic.
I have another,
raising your hand.
We got just a few minutes left here because it's supposed to be an hour.
You each have 90 seconds. Okay, so well, Nancy, 90 seconds. Go.
We're talking about the children's waiver and everything. Children, and Molly and David's kids are young. My son is 42. What I am looking at is the adult issues about how much happens when you get to be 40, 50 years old. You get high blood pressure, you get sleep apnea, you get all these other things, and the parents aren't around to tell you. And so that's another thing, another reason to keep facts, because if somebody had some kind of injury in the back, they might have arthritis there by the time they are 55. All kinds of stuff start coming up. And the whole thing about not knowing whether you're hot or cold or injured. You could have someone who's perfectly able to go out and do things in the world, but not know. I know personally of a situation where a guy broke his shoulder and did not know it for 3 weeks, but his body knew it, and he almost died because his body was reacting to this severe injury, and he ended up in the emergency room in the nick of time. So there's all kinds of stuff, not to scare you, but to say this does not stop when the children's waiver stops. It gets
Right.
worse. So
Yeah, it's a whole different system, and you need to figure
Right.
that system out. And you're right, there's problems that adults have that you don't even think about when they're kids.
Right.
But we want them to become adults. And so we need
Right.
to start thinking about it that way as well. Well,
Mhm.
thank you so much, Nancy. David, 90 seconds, go.
My mind went blank.
Great. Molly, I don't know why I'm doing it that way because it's kind of fun. Any final thoughts? David, Molly?
No, I can't go. It's David's turn.
Okay,
Yeah.
David.
I would just say, I mean, because we've got about 4 minutes left here. I mean, yes, I can't say enough good things about the Wiseman Center. That the Wiseman Center for us has kind of been the center of the universe, for a lot of different things. We are on the long-term waiver. I do like that Amy pointed out that not everybody qualifies. Obviously, when that from a funding perspective, we've utilized that quite a bit. We've purchased like chairs, and for a long time he has sensory processing, and IKEA makes plastic silverware that for the longest time that was all he would use, and so the waiver paid for that. It's what I will say for anybody that watches this: when it comes to the waiver, don't be afraid to ask. Right? You can't have what you don't ask for. If you think it's important, ask your case manager. If you're not on a long-term waiver, again, that's one of those things where now you start to think about what are some other services I can leverage. And I can't say enough good things about the Wiseman Center. That's probably where I would generally recommend people go if you don't qualify for the waiver for whatever reason. Again, cannot say enough good things about that place. And then when it comes to security in general, because I'm running out of time here, the band's striking up here, I would just say, in general, just try to have a security plan. Think about, your kid best, and, how can you ensure their safety? And again, there's lots of things to think about too there. So I could talk about it all day, but with that, I'll hand it over to Molly.
I love that Tim and I were playing the band to play you off stage.
I love it.
I can't say anything that hasn't been said. One of the things I think it's, I'm like the weird science girl. I'm like a stats girl. And again, it's the reason behind doing, what I did and just trying to get information out there. I think for parents, it's really important to know that kids on the autism spectrum are 40 times more likely to die from injury before they reach adulthood than the general population. So that means the mean age for families with children, or for people on the autism spectrum, is 36.2 compared to the mean age of 72 for the general population. And that is most likely related to preventable injury. 25% of children and adolescents on the autism spectrum make repeated visits to the emergency department. That data is national, but we did subsequent data here in Dane County, and it is accurate here as well. We were 22%. So not that far off. And so it's super important for us to think about safety all the time. I know I'm a weirdo safety girl about it, but I think it's really important for us to think about, to plan for, and to really make sure we understand about, but the resources are challenging to navigate. And so use your regional centers, use the Wiseman Center, reach out to Autism Society, and they'll help you find those resources, because it's so important for you to know and understand your child. Like Tim said, like, just know your kids, know what's different about them that sets them apart and makes them unique. And only you know that. I mean, textbooks can't tell you that, doctors can't tell you that. And I say that now that I am one, still can't tell you. So it's so important for us to know our kids and that. And with that, I'm done. I think I went over.
I forgot to start the timer, so I think you're fine.
I'm going to add one comment.
I think you had your 90 seconds.
Sorry. One thing Molly's son did very well, he picked the right parent.
There you go. Yes.
I picked the right kid.
Oh man.
Definitely did. No, so just for your awareness, the working title of my project was called Knowledge Assessment and Intervention, which spells out Kai, which is his name.
Oh, okay. Well, we are going to learn more about
Do
that,
you
Kai.
do formal presentations, Molly?
Nancy, can I finish this? Can I just?
Jeez,
No,
can I
I'm
just
ruder
finish
than
that?
you are,
out.
Tim.
I'm bringing her back in 2 months, Nancy. We're going to
All
have
right.
her back to talk about Kai.
All right.
Okay, because we want to learn more about Kai. And from there, maybe we can build on that and see how else we can have her with help her out on. I also talked to her about law enforcement. So we're all over
Yeah, we're
this.
on that.
We're all over this. But
We'll
yes,
see each
so
other.
couple of months, we are bringing Molly back. If you're following an order of months, April is the month after this month, and
Cool.
it is Autism
right.
Acceptance Month. And
to know.
for our safety series, we'll be speaking with Megan Farley from the Waisman Center, and we're going to be talking about suicide and autism. And so another aspect of safety about how can we help our children when they're dealing with some mental health issues. And so we'll be covering that in April, and then we're going to come back in May and talk all things Kai. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you'll just hold on, I want to make a different goodbye than that, but I do want to stop the recording. So thank you all very much.